It was the beginning of the end. We knew that in 15 or 20 years' time, we'd have nothing left. There were billions of gallons of water dripping overhead, flowing underneath. If you stopped for any little second, all you'd hear was water. It was the beginning of the end. People would wonder, was there a strange sense of security down there, hidden away from the world, hidden away even from light? And the priest from Alaska, or wherever he was from, he said he'd never seen anything like it. The dust, the dirt, the wet, the fumes, the smoke. It was war, but you wouldn't pass much heat on it. It was the beginning of the end. In the late of night, if there was silence, you'd hear the mountain coming down, the cracks from the rocks, the timbers breaking, bits falling from the ceiling, the chips from the joints. And actually, it was very frightening. In the daytime, the same thing was probably happening, but because of the noise, you wouldn't hear it. You wouldn't pass much regards on it. And things got better, a bit. Conditions improved. And there was no reason we shouldn't thrive for the next 15 or 20 years, given a fair chance. Although then there was the other priest, preaching at the women from the altar, who were having none of it. The beginning of the end. People are now talking about grid reinforcement and interconnection and the flickering shadows cast by the blades of turbines when the sun is low in the sky. Progress. A new leaf. Progress. A new leaf. Turning and turning. Turning and turning around. Progress. A new leaf, turning and turning around and around and around.
I'm podcasting from the hills above Loch Allen. I'm trying to reach people far away. Hello, Helsinki, Glasgow, Brooklyn. This is Leitrim calling. I've an urge to tell the world who I am, and where I am, and what it's like to live in Leitrim. Although I still get things wrong, even though I've lived here for 30 years. Sometimes I say I'm living in Leitrim because the mountains and lakes of Leitrim are spread before me in understated beauty. My home is a few minutes down the road, but it's in Roscommon, actually. The good thing is neither me nor the sheep are fussy about county boundaries. In fact, the sheep don't care about any boundaries. Last week they broke into my garden, a mammy sheep and 2 big girl sheep, sitting in a single huddle beside the beech hedge. I took a photograph and texted it to a friend saying that I had a new lawnmower. My friend has an automatic machine that crawls around the grass all summer long, keeping it manicured, but he lives in Mullingar, which is a very big, sophisticated city. The sheep stayed overnight at my door, and in the morning their droppings were everywhere. Droppings is a nice word for it, although only the 2 big girl sheep left droppings. The mammy sheep left huge mountains of black stuff like miniature slag heaps of coal, and you couldn't call it anything but shite. And I value shite, so I put it in a bucket and tossed it into the rose beds. My preferred word is dung, which my neighbour delivers from his cows every April, a box load on the back of a tractor, and I use it to feed the plants. I say dung, and he says manure, and neither of us use the S word because there is something very violent about that word, shite. Cavan people, of course, always say the weather is shite when it's raining. In Leitrim we don't, because in Leitrim it rains so much that people pretend they don't notice. So I'm sitting in the hills above Loch Allen, pondering the meaning of sheep droppings. It's a political act. I'm turning my back on modernity. I want to be hugged and cherished and loved just like everyone else, but I also love to be alone. And alone in the hills, I find a presence that draws me in and holds me when I walk alone. Loneliness comes with the dawn, an exquisite, beautiful loneliness, as the sun rises and I want to bathe in it forever. I was talking to a friend recently who also lives on high ground and relishes the solitude of the hills. A man who has looked out his window for 50 years, enjoying the constancy of the landscape. The mountain changes from hour to hour, yes, but the mountain always remains the same. It's always there. The undulation of the land, its slopes and drumlins, low-lying fields, and the hilly lanes that rise and weave themselves in familiar patterns around a human being, they all mattered to him. They were God's fingerprints, God shining in every quantum of the slanting sun, and he knew in his solitude that he was in love with the dawn. Because we are not alone in rural Ireland, even when we are alone. My friend mowed fields on the sloping hills with such precision each summer that he knew them like the back of his hand. He knew where the soggy ground was. He knew where the streams below the surface were. He knew what his little grey tractor could manage at every ditch and turn. The trouble is the land does change, imperceptibly, shaped and reshaped by human hands. Even I see it, on ditches where once blackthorn and wild rose and fuchsia bushes grew, but grow no longer. Because the roads were widened, Leitrim's wild roses were forgotten. I remember rushes that grew in the wet ground before it was drained, and the brown bog pools, and the syrupy streams of rusty ochre-coloured water that dribbled down through the ferrous rocks before it was planted. I remember old farmhouses, walled gardens, and old sheds that sank beneath the rising carpet of spruce on the sloping hills. Solitude is the gift of birds and bees, but in the darkest lair of the forest, no bird sings and no bee hums. Solitude opens conversations with an entire galaxy of deities and sentient beings. I've watched farming men for 40 years on mountain slopes, talking to goats in the dawn, remembering green trees that fell in winter storms, petting furry black-headed cattle in the fog, and wheelbarrowing fodder through rocky ground to reach their animals in winter blizzards that veiled both man and beast in a single silhouette of love. I've seen them go about their business untroubled by change and confident in the permanence of a love which can only be known by walking alone in the morning light. But not for any longer. Forestry swallows the houses first, then the townlands, and finally the memories of old men. A man looks out his window for 50 years, watching the mountain, and the mountain stands where it always stood, and the lake below is in his sights. Then forests come, and he grows weary and too old to get off the chair beside the fire. Eventually he moves to lower ground, to pass his final days in a nursing home where no one has ever heard the sound of the townland where he was born, and where no one can read his fingers tapping out old tunes on the arm of a chair. Some day a nurse may ask him where he came from, and as he whispers a townland name, the nurse may or may not notice the tears in his eyes.
Written in Creevely Friary. And in each heart there lies this feather's counterpart,
Farid al-Din Attar, The Conference of the Birds, 12th century. The cursive of the arches in the cloister, the Richter scaled jerk of harebells, here in Creevely, in the cemetery. Write something rhythmic, there's a pull, it's inevitable. A poor Clare's hand, a feather pen, bloom of walnut ink on lambent vellum, a thrill of penmanship overseen by a melted angel. Love, lose, love, lose, love, lose, love, lose. There's words in the air, too, and birds. Memory of a preaching by a road. Something, something, Francis. Something, something, neither reap nor sow. And your terrier sends a stare to nowhere, barks twice at tourists, swinging rusted gates. Hiya, he's okay. Now where were you? Lose, love, lose, love, lose, love, lose, love. The columns capture flits and bits, a V, an S, as when you make your hands a cup in heavy rain, and in that sudden mirror, a blue tit, framed in silver sky, drains between the spaces in your fingers to a grave it isn't certain you should be standing on. Love, lose, love, lose, love, lose, love, lose. Because you just wouldn't know, said the local man who guided you away from a field of cattle grazing where the river marks the border. You just wouldn't know a lichened lump is the body of a saint, or that thingy with the oval yolks attached is a branch of perching birds, alert to a hermit's words in Tuscany. Lose love, lose love, lose love, lose love. Umbellifers residing in the friary tilt toward a reddish blinking in the chancel. See it semaphoring faintly, on, off, from within a tattered clump of fabric flowers. A light-emitting diode circa 2006, encased in scarlet heart-shaped plastic, stutters something sacred something. Hemlocks cock their umbels for a better signal. Love lose, love lose, love lose, love lose. Sure, time and rain efface the figure of St. Francis in the Abbey, but what swells a heart is written in the arches of the cloister, in fractured headstones and truly joined up lovers, in swooping swallows, living ink, such arabesques they draw from birth to death, keeping minutes for the conference of the birds. Lose love, lose love, lose love, lose love.
Knock the light off.
I dropped a stone in consciousness to see how far it fell, but for all I tried to listen to the wishings of the well, it never stopped ascending and it barely raised a sound, and in this never-ending maze of cosmic variance I found that I a master and apprentice now within my own existence. And I cast my lines of emphasis to fish for my subsistence in the ocean of the mind and in the rivers of the heart with the devotion to divine manifestations of the arts. And I went down into the other world to set my shadow free. And in the darkness of that cave I heard the echoes of the she, where Freke the son of Maeve was carved an ohm upon the stone, and the Morrigan awakened and appeared to me alone. And she said, I've been the eel, I've been the cow, the wolf and crow, and I've seen the future now, there's something you should know. And as I stood there in that silence, she then whispered in my ear, at the heart of life is violence, at the heart of love is fear. But through fear we move from ego to become our spirit guides, as we learn instead to let go and succumb to live our lives in the presence of that shadow and the light from which it's cast, with a focus on the future and acceptance of the past. And through violence comes the chaos, but from chaos comes the calm, and without it there's compliance to the plight and fate of man. For all have been condemned to fight their wars who toil for peace, in order to transcend the inner turmoil of the beast. Yet all contained that dance of hope and love and pain and fear, though at a glance may seem to cope, or so it would appear. For many grow content to see that life is what they know, but in the end they too descend and to that darkness go. So no, she said, and looked at me, and in that knowing find that gnosis comes to those who seek the way of the divine, who understand the all as I, who see the all as I, shall answer to that higher call and fall but never die. And I left her in that cavern as I crawled back to the light, and I lay upon Rathcrohan till the day became the night, with my thoughts upon the Tawn and on the warriors of yore, who had fought upon these plains and who'd walked these fields before. And I thought about Cuchulainn, about Ferdia and Fionn, and of the tales about the Fianna and the trials they'd overcome. And I thought of Maeve and Allel and their palace that was there, and of the masses that were gathered and assembled for the fair. And though the ancestors regaled me of the time spent in their youth, when the jesters took the lies and then rebranded them as truth, as they mocked the great and powerful with their stories and their jokes, and the paradoxic parables that their parodies invoked, I thought back to the present, of how we'll be seen today, as the crescent moon was rising on the runes on which I lay. And I wondered if they'll teach us as a lesson in their schools, or as a tale to tell their kids about the king who played the fool. But the stone I dropped kept falling, until one day I looked down, just to see that where I dropped it, it was nowhere to be found. And in the place I thought I left it was a hand I held in mine, as a gift of understanding that was sent from the divine. But once more I heard the Morrigan from the shadows of that cave, as her voice arose and echoed, and she bade me to be brave. And I swear I heard her laughing as she held on to that stone and said, love is not a choice, it's just a truth that must be known.
Voices are drifting from over the bog, from beyond the Cashcarrigan road. A bird cloud rises like ash from the field as the wind stirs the reeds to a rustle. The clack and snap of the swinging bench chain is the slow tick of a clock or the echo of a faraway gun. The glow of masonite smokestack clots the horizon. Through the kitchen window I can see the red and blue plaque of CNN's luminosity and my mother's hand knocking on the glass. Saturn and Jupiter are floating together for the first time in 400 years. I take the binoculars and crouch by the fence so the gas giants float between two wooden planks near the factory's upward twirl of orange smoke. One planet's spark is bright, the other faint, sperm approaching an egg. Ireland's ice sheet once covered this land, a kilometre deep, a kilometre closer to heaven. How hot the stars would seem from way up there, how near the conjunction of planets that once was thought to be the Star of Bethlehem or linked to portents of doom. The next day I walk past ridged teardrops of drumlins and plantations of felled Sitka spruce. Within a slatted shed, the radio talks to the cows. 727 new cases, the rainforest on fire in Brazil. Bordnamona to cease its extraction of peat. Tonight the great conjunction will peak. The parish church is locked. I look through a window. The sacristy lamp hangs red from its chain. Around the back a bucket has frozen, and I pry out its thick disk of ice. I bring it around to the side of the road and lean it by a statue of Mary. The country lanes are deserted, the setting sun as intense as Jupiter's great red spot. In a month or so, these rough handfuls of rushes will be woven into St. Bridget's crosses. Meanwhile, the Virgin's ice disk melts and melts, and I must not forget. The summer I penciled my X in the box at the parish hall by the parish church, saying yes, I will, yes, 1,000 times yes, before folding my ballot in half and walking home this way in evening light, amid the hawthorn's Maytime scent of sex, death, life.
Up the mountain I go. I walk my way from Pator out near Aughnasheelin, not far from Balnamore, up the pass that the forestry made. I can see no one here, and there's not a soul to bother me. 5 kilometres I'll go. I'll go as far as the Cavan line, and then, each to their own, I'll return. This mountain is now my playground, my adventure park, the place I go to look back at me. My place is among the Drumlin Hills around Drumshangore in County Leitrim. A forlorn collection of fields, cow tracks and memories, full of dreams, dam rushes and whins. A beauty only exposed by the pages of time. We drew water from Gaeltacht Well, and we went with our nets to Claw River,
hoping that we might catch a whale. There was never any fish in Claw River, so why not wish for a big one? This was the centre of our universe. No one stood in our way, and there were no lines of tourists or sightseers on the Drummeal Road. No one could see what we could see. But maybe I only see in hindsight and romantic muse. Now, as I sink into my autumn plumage, I've had to take up walking. Walking for no reason, as my father would say. My father loathed walkers. They're out walking again instead of doing something useful. He'll make another heave in his grave and turn. I have questions for him, if he's listening. I have questions for my Leitrim. Who are we and where are we going? I go to our biggest hill, the hill we call a mountain. For the Iron Mountains are all around me now. As I go for my daily walk, I see the coal-faced quarry, the rivers and the streams, the rusty iron trickle that wets beneath my feet. But mostly I see Sitka spruce, yawning out in front of me. The Leitrim man's poison that they tried to burn. Someone tried to burn this mountain, but around here, no one is ever got for anything. But I'm not looking for trouble. I'm not looking for coal or gold or bandwagons to jump on. I'm just here for the road. 5k out and 5k back, and my Apple Watch will do the sums. I'm shedding pounds and sweating. I got horrid fat during lockdown, stuffed me face with biscuits and never went to place, swelled up like a harvest frog, got welded to the big chair in the front room watching soccer and the news and Gogglebox. It only hit me when I couldn't tie me lace. I should have seen it coming. A man said to me one time in the hospital in 1984, I was 19 years and 16 stone. He said that I'd be over 300 weight by the time I was 30. He said I'd no be the round arse on you. I was playing for the county at the time, brought off to casualty with a dislocated thumb and broken dreams. It's in your genes, he said. You'll always be heavy. You may keep moving or you'll be caught. No one wants to carry a 20-stone corpse. I push on up the hill as my daily walk thickens, the dog delighted with my newfound fear of obesity. There's a silver lining to every fat man's togs. My fitter-than-thou timepiece tells me that I'm overheating. I'm flat out, but my exercise ring is closing. And the same McGahern never broke a sweat. I'm shedding pounds and fuming. Why is my only cargo just large bits of me? Why me? I'd have made a great thin man. I'd have made two of them. But instead there's a steam rising off me like a choo-choo train. Suddenly the terrain levels out and my heart rate comes back to meet me. I think of my Leitrim now. Our spirit, our past, our brow-beaten disguise. Who will close our eyes when we finally give in? Who will get the farm? What'll they do when the farms are gone? But we're not bet yet. We're carrying them around in the boot of the car. Fold up farms to take out after work. Push on, young Rourke. Just walk. The mountain becomes majestic. I think of small shops now and bars and idle houses. I think of those who spent their lives making lunches. Your educated children have seen the light, their own light. No light gets in, but we get out. And then, who will play for the county and who will play for the county home? And when we're all old age pensioners parked on double yellow lines, with our special offer chicken fillets sitting in the back seat for a tad too long, what will be our song? Will it still be lovely Leitrim? I cross over the concrete bridge where me and the river catches breath. Not all life has to puff and pant. I hear my own children in my head. They're mad intent on rambling. They've been in tighter spots nor this. The youth will always outrun the pessimist. At last, the mist is clearing. The day is finally breaking, and at last I consider my surroundings. O irony of irony in the Iron Mountains, why are we complaining? We have perfect soil for planting, perfect lanes for walking, perfect time for thinking. We'd be happy out if it wasn't for one's telling us otherwise. Must everywhere be bustling? Is every hill for climbing? Is remembering our only weapon? This is my place, dull as dishwater to some, but to me it's home, and everything that I ever was and have become. Give me time here and I will find the embers. Give me my Leitrim youth and I will show you the slivers of hope. Give me hope, and we will all walk on from this.
Thank you and welcome. Your presence warms our hearts. Ladies and gentlemen, we come before you as did the strolling players of old, to bring from near and distant parts that found acclaim on every town hall stage. Drama, song and panto too. Naught came amiss. So throw away your worries, discard dull care, for your town hall festive party is on the air. The old time fit-ups. Nora Fogarty says, from the very first instance, what class of a fit-up I was set for I didn't know. But then my whole life at the time was like that. Wandering the roads of the Mullies in a dream. They'll talk to you about spiritual experience, immersing yourself in the Godhead, or whatever. But for me, it was that first night that I knew McMaster and his rapscallions visited the Mullies. I think I must have been 8 years old at the time, or maybe 9 or 10, I don't know. He seemed to me about 10 feet tall, or maybe 11, or perhaps even 100. Don't ask me. Anyway, we were all there with our ticket. And with all going well until Annie McRourty from the mountain let out a roar. Go back to wherever it is you came from, she shouted, because you're nothing. You're nothing, I'm afraid, only a dirty, rotten, lousy old moor. But if that was bad, the second night was worse, when Tommy McLaughlin climbed onto the stage full drunk, battering a black and tan with an umbrella. Go to town, don't come back, you're either miserable, rotten tribe. Ah, here, missus, said Anya McMaster. It was the talk of the place, the worst carry-on of the fit-ups yet. But nothing to what happened on the last weekend, when the Blessed Virgin's sister put in a personal appearance. That would be St. Bernadette, which Nora Fogarty knew, what with her having been reciting the rosary at the time. You're a very holy child, said Bernie. And after that, Nora was hooked. Nora, the poor creature, she was hooked on being a holy child. Going for long walks with Evelyn MacDonald, her best friend, 7, who was addicted to eating flies. I only pray you'll be cured, young Nora would say in a whisper. I only pray, Evelyn MacDonald, eater of flies, that one day you will be cured. Before sewing her own special missionary missal for Mary, Nora Fogarty's mission from God. With never a week passing but she made her way up Church Hill to the Canon, revealing numerous more sins than anyone else in town. Even McLaughlin, the black and tan baiter, it has to be said, and that took some doing. What a fit-up. She had the missioners plagued as well, and that took some doing. And I will put enmity between thy seed and her seed, because until the Antichrist is vanquished, there can be no peace. What a fit-up. Lord above all the fit-ups of this world that you find. Grease paint in the pulpit, crimson fire hanging high above the town. Way out there beyond the roofs of the world. Then it was off to fit up in the trees. With Evelyn in the quiet of Tobermoor Wood, where all, is it true? Yes, where all of the woodland creatures they could talk, where all of the woodland creatures, believe it or not, they could talk, in a glorious display of fit-ups for animals. Quiet, please, Evelyn MacDonald would say. It's time for all Nananavi of Eglav. As a badger or a fox or a little cuneen would lift its book. Then came the winter, and Evelyn and Nora would leave messages for Our Lady, printed in the frost on various windowsills of the town. It was beautiful just waiting, imagining her eyes as she read the words out in the dark. We're so special, said Evelyn. And they were. Nora's return. I don't go to the shows much anymore. But the fit-ups, of course, now a thing of the past. When Mammy was alive, we used to always go through the old photographs. Like Othello and all the rest. I got cancer 12 months and I don't know how long I've got. Talk about being fitted up. With the very first scan coming back whistled clean. But, like the oncologist says, these things happen. Even modern science is fallible. We were a right pair of Egypts, me and MacDonald, all the same. Evelyn the fly eater, God bless us and save us. Long gone too. A pair of us joined the Legion, the clowns that we were. I still have the picture. Look, here it is in the shoebox. With the pair of us all fitted out like Our Lady and Bernadette, sister of the Mother of God. I often think of them watching us receiving communion with our lips in time moving, and the pair of us halfway up to heaven along the aisle, all kitted out in our wings, the wings of angels made from poultry products, feathers, as we stormed the halls of heaven for all we were worth. The greatest show on earth, said Evelyn. The fit-ups have got nothing to offer, nothing on earth to offer like Evelyn the fly-eater MacDonald and Nora. As I fall to my knees among the thistles of the Ringfort field and say it again like I did on that first time. What a pity, I said. What a pity that things can't be so that we can be this way forever.
It was the beginning of the end. We knew that in 15 or 20 years' time, we'd have nothing left. There were billions of gallons of water dripping overhead, flowing underneath. If you stopped for any little second, all you'd hear was water. It was the beginning of the end. People would wonder, was there a strange sense of security down there, hidden away from the world, hidden away even from light? And the priest from Alaska, or wherever he was from, he said he'd never seen anything like it. The dust, the dirt, the wet, the fumes, the smoke. It was war, but you wouldn't pass much heat on it. It was the beginning of the end. In the late of night, if there was silence, you'd hear the mountain coming down. The cracks from the rocks, the timbers breaking, bits falling from the ceiling, the chips from the joints. And actually, it was very frightening. In the daytime, the same thing was probably happening, but because of the noise, you wouldn't hear it. You wouldn't pass much regards on it. And things got better, a bit. Conditions improved. And there was no reason we shouldn't thrive for the next 15 or 20 years, given a fair chance. Although then there was the other priest, preaching at the women from the altar, who were having none of it. The beginning of the end. People are now talking about grid reinforcement and interconnection and the flickering shadows cast by the blades of turbines when the sun is low in the sky. Progress. A new leaf. Progress. A new leaf. Turning and turning. Turning and turning around. Progress. A new leaf, turning and turning around and around and around.